My name's Jean Seaton and I'm the director of the Orwell Prize, which is a prize that is set up in England in order to further George Orwell's ambition to turn political writing into an art. And we are immensely excited and of course feel hugely privileged to have been able to bring and to come to this festival which is celebrating writing and imagination, and also political imagination, I think, at this point in Myanmar's history. It's a huge privilege to be here. I think that's what everybody, I think if you're Burmese, you should know that everybody that's come from abroad just feels that an enormous gift has been given to them, that we're able to come here. What we're going to do this afternoon, I've got two polymaths to offer you at this moment in your afternoon. We're going to have a lecture by Timothy Garton-Ash, who is, in Britain, a winner of the Orwell Prize. There are actually several around. We're in the past, jolly prescient prize winners. Timothy is both a professor in Oxford, but also an incredibly distinguished and prolific journalist. So like Orwell, he does writing books and going and seeing and journalism. He wrote a book called The File, which is a very chilling account, I think, of betrayal and human relationships and the present looking different from the past. He also wrote a wonderful book called The Subversive Fact, which is also, it's about the way in which true facts do more damage to lies than anything. But he's also leading an extraordinary project that I think he will tell you about, which you can join online, which is attempting to establish some rules for freedom of speech and some rules for the limits of freedom of speech. And he's going to give us a lecture on Orwell, and I will come back to that in a minute. But the other polymath we have is similarly a person who, Pei Myint, who is not only now an editor of a newspaper and has a long and distinguished history of writing books, doing journalism, but is also a translator and was a doctor. And it struck me that he had translated into Burmese Chekhov. And Chekhov, of course, was also a doctor. Maybe being a doctor is a very good place to do liberal politics from. It may be illness and disease is a very good metaphor for thinking your way through health and what health might be. So we are very delighted to see you all here. And what we're going to do is Timothy is going to talk about Orwell, for whom Burma was the founding experience. Now, we don't worship Burma, but Orwell, there was lots of things Orwell didn't do right, but his values, I think, are bigger than him. Truth before self, perhaps above all, actually. So Timothy's going to give a lecture, going to tell us about Orwell in the past and Orwell now, and then Pei Myint is going to comment on that. And then we will open up the floor for discussion. But I think we're very grateful that you're all here. That's what we'd like to say.
Well, hello everybody, and first of all, congratulations on having got a great seat for the next session. Meanwhile, we do have some other business, Orwell business. And I do want to say, first of all, a very warm thank you to Jean Seaton and her colleague at the Orwell Prize. They've done an absolutely amazing job in promoting the spirit and the letter of what many of us, I think, would feel is the greatest political writer of the 20th century, bar none. I also want to dedicate this this lecture to the memory of a very dear colleague and friend at Oxford, whose name will be familiar to some of you. His name was Michael Ayres, Dr. Michael Ayres. Michael was, as I say, a dear friend. In those slightly more than 10 years when he was forcibly, not to say brutally, separated from Daw Suu, his wife, he showed an extraordinary kind of tireless, quiet courage in promoting the cause of Burmese freedom, putting his own career and life on the back burner, and then, of course, died tragically young, and I think he must be remembered here today. It was actually Michael who got me to Burma exactly 13 years ago, in the year 2000, when I got in here, not of course saying on my visa form what I was actually going to do. I believe I was a merchant or something like that. Anyway, I managed to travel around the country for 2 extraordinary weeks. I ended up giving a lecture at the headquarters of the NLD on transitions to democracy, with Daw Suu interpreting in all senses of the word, linguistically and otherwise, which was one of the more amazing experiences of my life, certainly. Whereupon they took me apart at the airport. I wrote about it in the New York Review of Books. The essays actually in that book, Facts Are Subversive. And of course they put me on the blacklist, where I remained for 12 years until last summer, when, as you may know, the Burmese President's Office very sweetly issued a list of about 2,000 people who were now no longer on the blacklist and were therefore welcome to come to Burma. And many of these people were just called something like James, or I think there were 17 people just called Mohammed, or the whole of the University of Yale, or some of them were dead. But one or two of us were real, and one of them was me, and that makes it a particular pleasure to be back here after 13 years. Now, what I'm going to do in this lecture is to talk about 3 George Orwells. One of Burma past, one of Myanmar past, and one of Burma, Myanmar present and to come. Okay? And to try and explore his relevance for those 3 different periods of the history of this extraordinary country. Now the first one, Burma past, of course he wasn't called George Orwell, because as you know, George Orwell was a pseudonym. He was just plain Eric Blair, and this kid from one of England's most privileged schools, Eton, did this extraordinary thing of going off to become an imperial policeman in Burma. This was not posh, pucker Indian civil service. It was right down dirty. It was a place where they did the beating up of the people and the imprisoning the people and hanging people at door. Which is one reason that then Eric Blair pretty quickly worked out what a very nasty thing imperialism is. And he didn't like it. And he left soon thereafter to go and become a writer, but he left behind a couple of superb essays based on his Burmese experience. One is about witnessing a hanging at dawn, and has, as those of you will know, who know it, has this amazing detail where this poor guy, Burmese guy, who's going to be hung by the colonial masters, as he's going to the gallows, steps carefully around a puddle so as not to get his feet wet. And it's such an extraordinary detail for capturing the poignancy of that moment. The other is shooting an elephant, which I think you, Pemian, want to talk about a bit, which is an absolutely brilliant essay which captures the absurdity of imperialism. So Orwell goes back, determined to become a political writer, not an imperial policeman. He has to work very hard to become a writer, because I have to tell you that he wasn't a very good writer to begin with. One of his close friends read one of his early typescripts and said he writes like a cow with a musket, which is a great description. Actually, I don't think Burmese Days is a terribly good book, to be honest. It's rather Somerset Maugham. But it was the only book of George Orwell that was available here when I was here 13 years ago.